Hey everybody, welcome to CasNCourt TV. This is your girl, Miss Public Info here with the latest and greatest and sometimes hated updates of the most high-profile cases going on around the country. So today, guys, we're going to continue our coverage of the uh, Chauncey Billups NBA indictment scandal, the poker scheme, the alleged poker scheme. I'm going to start this episode, much like I did yesterday, giving the disclaimer that I know the Billups family. I am very much enamored with them. They are a good family. I've never known them to be involved in any sort of scandal or anything like that. Definitely, Chauncey is a philanthropist in the Denver, Colorado area, specifically the neighborhood in which he grew up in, which my parents grew up in, and cousins and uncles and aunts in Park Hill, as a predominantly Black American area. And that is where Chauncey Billups is from. I went to college with Rodney Billups, his brother, who is now the assistant coach at the Denver Nuggets. And while Rodney was playing basketball at our school, I was the PR and marketing coordinator of the men's basketball team. So I would, be at the games working, and Chauncey's and Rodney's parents, Faye and Ray, would be there. So I, don't know them closely, as in, we get together on holidays and we're best friends and we do vacations and things of that nature. But certainly family members of mine have been, close with, the family or individual members of the family, and I have that connection. So I'm giving that disclaimer because I want to, number one, want everyone to understand that this information that I'm talking about, I will give legal purview and analysis and all of that, like I usually do on the show, as we go through the indictment, which I do have. But at the same time, it is going to be tempered with the utmost respect. Yes, because I do have a knowledge of the family, and because I, have some, close proximity to them, and they're from the neighborhood in which my mom is from. So I am going to have a little bit of you know, uh, more uh, more sensitivity around this topic than I normally would when I cover certain cases. So now we're gonna get into the indictment and all of that and what all of this entails. Number one, some people might be wondering why this is a big deal. Because they just maybe don't understand, number one, the game of basketball, professional sports. I have been very blessed in my life to have worked in many facets of corporate America, and one of those facets was the National Basketball Association, and I worked for the summer leagues. I was actually a marketing game operations director for the Summer Pro League here in Los Angeles when it was going on. And so I worked with a lot of teams, including the Lakers and the Miami Heat and all of that. And in my time in the Clippers. And so in my time and working with those teams and national teams, FIBA and the FIBA League and all of these things, I learned a lot about the league, but also understood the seriousness of the league and the integrity of the league. And so, one of the reasons this is really important, this case is a really big deal to people like Adam Silver, who is the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, and why Congress is now, we got a note from Politico just about an hour ago that Congress is now calling for information about this basketball scheme. And the reason it's such an important thing is because obviously the National Basketball League is a league that makes money, right? But in underneath that, it makes money by the quality and integrity of the game. They guarantee a certain amount of integrity and quality of the game, meaning that the games aren't fixed, meaning that there aren't people out here, scheming and scamming so that certain teams can win championships or can win playoffs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The guys that are in the league are the best in the world, and they are supposed to be confirmed to be the best in the world based upon the outcome of the playoffs, based upon the outcome of the championship games. But if we have a problem, a rift within the National Basketball League, where we have players and coaches who are actually, involved in sports betting schemes, then that damages the integrity of the game. And that is why it's so important and why this thing is important. Also, I want to talk about what this certain things mean because when I go through the indictment, you might be a little bit confused. Now, the term straight, in quotations, straight illegal poker games. The term straight illegal poker games. First of all, what is an illegal poker game? Any poker game that is created by someone who then takes a percentage of winnings from the poker game is illegal. Now, I do understand that that would mean that many poker games going on in people's homes throughout the week all over the country are probably illegal, right? Technically, you're not supposed to do it, right? So that is what an illegal poker game is. Again, if you are setting up a poker game and then you take a percentage of the pot as the organizer of the game, then that is an illegal poker game. Now, what is a straight illegal poker game? A straight illegal poker game is one that is, we all understand what the rules are. We understand this is, an illegal game. Oh, dude, whoever, Jim Smo, who is organizing the thing, is going to take a percentage. We all understand that. We're all in accordance with this and we get it. No one's cheating one another. That's not happening. But we all get that this guy is going to take a percentage of it because he's, the purveyor of the poker game. He sort of, controls all. And so therefore he's going to take a percentage of the pot. That is a straight illegal poker game. And the reason I'm making these definitions clear and very concise is because they are repeated several times in the indictment, and I'm going to go over it. This is a 22-page indictment. It's not that long. We're not going to go over all 22 pages, but we are going to go over it for enough for you to understand what exactly happened in this particular situation. So I wanted to preference it with that, okay? Let's see if there's anything I want to go through before we get to the game. Let me read the statement from Chauncey Billups' attorneys. Yesterday's episode, I sort of gave a brief overview without having read the indictment. The indictment was actually unsealed on Thursday, so I didn't have my hands on it quite yesterday, but I have it now, and I've had a chance rather to go through it. But yesterday I gave a brief overview. But in that overview, I should have given the statement that Chauncey Billups' attorneys gave in response to the 22-page indictment. And they say as follows. Anyone who knows Chauncey Billups knows he is a man of integrity. Men of integrity do not cheat and defraud others. To believe that Chauncey did what the federal government is accusing him of is to believe that he would risk his Hall of Fame legacy, his reputation, and his freedom. He would not jeopardize those things for anything, let alone a card game. Furthermore, Chauncey Billups has never and would never gamble on basketball games, provide insider information, or sacrifice the trust of his team and the league, as it would tarnish the game he has devoted his entire life to. Chauncey Billups has never backed down. He does not plan to do it so now. He will fight these allegations with the same tenacity that marked his 28-year career. We look forward to our day in court. And that was from his team, his defense team. And, I think that the statement from his defense team was fine. But I did find it interesting that they included the fact that he would not fix games. Now, I want to explain that because I'm not going to go over the scary Terry Rozier indictment. That's Terry Rozier, who I mentioned in my overview yesterday, who was accused in a separate indictment than Chauncey Billups' indictment. His indictment had to do with fixing basketball games, pretending to be injured in one game against the Pelicans, so that he could purposely, perhaps, lose this game, throw a game, if you will, cause his team to lose so that, a side bet or a side, yes, a side bet or side wager could win and go in the favor in which he wanted. But Chauncey Billups was not, it's important to note that Chauncey Billups was not charged in the Scary Terry Rozier. Scary Terry is his nickname, in the Terry Rozier indictment. He has not been alleged to have thrown games or anything like that, but he was referenced in the Terry Rozier indictment, not named per se, but one could surmise that they may have been talking about Chauncey Billups as it relates to um, the indictment that Terry was mentioned in. I believe this was. I wanted to try and. I don't have that indictment anyway, but I want to reference point where Chauncey Billups was mentioned in that particular indictment. I think I have it here where it said something about. Yes. Billups is not charged in the second indictment. He appears to be identified as co-conspirator 8 in the Terry Rozier case, for allegedly leaking secret information to gamblers that the Portland Trailblazers were planning to tank a March 24th, 2023 game against the Chicago Bulls, a tip off that netted the bettors big winnings. Now, this is according to the indictment against Terry Rozier. So, though Chauncey Billups was not mentioned by name, it appears that he was identified as co-conspirator 8 in that particular indictment, and that they made the claim that Chauncey was actually allegedly leaking information or secret information to gamblers, that the Portland Trailblazers were planning to purposely lose a March 2023 game against the Chicago Bulls, that would help folks who were betting net big winnings. Okay, so I wanted to be clear that he wasn't charged or indicted in the Terry Rozier indictment, because his attorneys in this particular statement, they're being very they're being very circumspect about the fact that Chauncey would never, you know, leak information or do anything like that. And I thought that was interesting because he hadn't been formally indicted, but instead they took the time out to sort of try or attempt to clear his name as it relates to the mention of the co-conspirator 8, which folks have surmised is him because of the Portland Trailblazer connection. And he's the former coach, he's suspended now, of the Portland Trailblazers. So that is the reason that that his attorneys did that. So I think that that's very interesting that they would do that. Now, on that particular note, I also want to mention as well that I wanted to mention before I got into into the indictment, that there is a pro poker player that says that Chauncey Billups actually, this was in 2023. There was a pro poker player who in 2023 named Matt Berkey, who said he made allegations about Chauncey Billups in 2023 during an appearance on the Only Friends podcast, that Chauncey was basically rigging poker games. And that it was this rigged poker game was built up around Chauncey, and that he actually turned down the opportunity to be involved in the game because he knew it was rigged. He said that he thought that the poker game involving Chauncey Billups started in 2019 in Los Angeles before moving to Vegas. Now, that is actually confirmed in the indictment. The indictment has the poker game starting back in April of 2019 at the earliest. So this guy, Matt Berkey, has that correct. He said that, you know, he did not want to get involved with the poker game because he knew the people involved and he thought it was rigged. He said that he had talked to friends who played in the game and it was, in quote, for sure confirmed to be a cheated game. Now, this was back in 2023, way before just last Thursday, where, Chauncey and 30 other guys were indicted for this poker game scheme. He said that they played Texas Hold'em and said that people who won actually did not understand the game, but knew what cards were coming. They knew what cards were coming. He says only the pros were losing the games, according to Berkey, and that they got absolutely filleted by these amateurs who didn't even know how to play the game. He said of the pros losing the game, he said you don't have to be good if you can know the deck start to finish. Of course, the pros, looked bad because they didn't know what the deck was. So he says that he noted, this is Matt Berkey, the professional uh, poker player. He noted that it's hard to confront someone like Chauncey Billups because those people, in quote, carry a lot of weight and hold a lot of power. So that is very interesting. I thought that was very interesting coming from this guy that he would say back in 2023 before this thing even, turned up on an indictment that this was going on. The indictment says that this thing started in April of 2019. Matt Berkey back in 2023 actually confirms that this thing started in 2019. So it's really interesting, all of the things that are starting to be confirmed. So now let's get into the indictment. I'm first going to go over the press release that came from the yes, okay, the press release that came from the Department of Justice. So I'm going to read a little bit through there because that's going to give us a little bit of an overview here. And obviously you see up here the 31 defendants, including members and associates of organized crime families and National Basketball Association coach Chauncey Billups, charged in schemes to rig illegal poker games. And I want to be clear that just because Chauncey's name is up front and center, it doesn't mean that he's the biggest alleged boogeyman here. They've joined this because he is the most high profile and sort of it's more sexy to sort of spotlight someone who is more notable than some of the other folks. Though they don't say that, they don't put it in the heading that it's the Lucchese, the Bananos, the Gambinos, and the Genovese. I think that's sexier than saying that it's, Chauncey Billups, who's an NBA coach. But I digress, especially because these were poker games and not alleged, NBA games that they were, rigging. So this is really interesting. So um, let's go into what the Department of Justice is saying here. The Department of Justice said the following, and this is U.S. Attorney Nocella, who is the lead attorney on this and is the person who is, who wrote up the indictment and did all of this. So there was a 7-count indictment that was unsealed, charging 31 defendants in criminal schemes to rig illegal poker games at various locations in New York City, East Hampton, New York, and throughout the United States. Thursday morning, 31 defendants were arrested in 11 states, including members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese organized crime families of La Cosa Nostra, also known as LCN, and I will say also known as the Firm. We've heard several names for them. Chauncey Billups, head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers of the National Basketball Association, and Damon Jones, also known as D, a former NBA player with the Cleveland Cavaliers and Miami Heat. The defendants will make initial court appearances. They did so on Friday at a federal courthouse throughout the United States, including the Eastern District of New York. Now, Joseph Nicola Jr., he is the lead U.S. attorney on this case from the Eastern District. He wrote up all of this, so you're going to hear me reference him many times. And he is quoted as saying the following: as alleged, members and associates of organized crime families fixed illegal poker games as part of a highly sophisticated and lucrative fraud scheme to cheat victims out of millions of dollars and conspired with others to perpetuate their frauds. Well known former NBA players and former professional athletes acted as face cards to lure unsuspecting victims to high stakes poker games, where they were then at the mercy of concealed technology, including rigged shuffling machines and specially designed contact lenses and sunglasses to read the backs of playing cards, which ensured that victims would lose big. So he goes on to say that, again, that 30 people were arrested and charged for their alleged roles in the criminal schemes to win large amounts of money. He says that these individuals used technology to deceive and scam innocent victims out of millions of dollars. Eventually, the money funneling to La Cosa Nostra and enriching one of the most notorious criminal networks in the world. So basically, the money in which was scammed away from these high rollers that were brought in and lured into the game allegedly by Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones, that the funds that they scammed these folks out of, these unsuspecting folks out of, that these funds actually went back into funneling money into the La Cosa Nostra. As a matter of fact, the indictment states that the money was actually bought back into, was laundered back into the various four of the five families who were involved in all of this, and that the money was hidden under shell companies. That's what the indictment says verbatim. So the FBI goes on to say that this investigation spanned 9 states and FBI offices. They go on to, talk about how this game use the allure of high stakes winnings and the promise to play alongside some well-known professional athletes, that these defendants allegedly defrauded unwitting victims out of tens of millions of dollars and established a financial pipeline to La Cosa Nostra, and that the alleged scheme wreaked havoc across the nation, exploiting the notoriety of some and the wallets of others to finance the Italian crime families. The FBI says that their office maintains its aggressive pursuit of any Italian organized crime operating in their jurisdiction and will continue to stem all unlawful revenue streams fueling their illicit activity. They go on. With the alleged involvement of three of the La Cosa Nostra crime families, an NBA coach and Hall of Famer, they're presumably talking about Chauncey Billups, as well as other current and professional athletes like Damon Jones, formerly of the Miami Heat. The investigative work that culminated with the operation are reminiscent of a Hollywood movie, they said. They said that this was not luck and it was not theatrics. That was the difference here. They said that over 4 years ago, that the Homeland Security Investigations of New York had uncovered the operation and worked tirelessly with the Homeland Security Investigations of Newark, the FBI, the New York Waterfront Commission, and the NYPD to expose crimes that defrauded victims of at least $7 million and included violent robberies. And the indictment actually spotlights that the mafia members were actually threatening the victims in the game. There are seven John Does listed in the indictment, and throughout the indictment, it's talks about how they were threatened by the members of these crime families to pay up, essentially. That even though they were scammed out of it and they continue to be scammed, they were made to pay up. And if they did not, they X, Y, and Z would happen. They weren't specific about the threats, but they were specific that they were threatened by the crime family members. Now, the FBI goes on and says, as alleged in the indictment, beginning as early as 2019, the defendants engaged in a series of schemes to use wireless cheating technology to rig illegal poker games, most commonly Texas Hold'em in the Eastern District of New York and around the United States. So these games would take place. They had a game in New York called Lexington Avenue. They also had a game in Las Vegas. They had a game in DC, I believe. They had a game in I want to say a game in Los Angeles, but that game eventually became the Vegas game. And so they had several of these games going on around the country. So that's what the FBI is mentioning in this press release. That's what they're talking about. Co-conspirators in the scheme included game organizers who arranged for unwitting victims to play in underground illegal poker games that were secretly rigged, suppliers of the rigged cheating technology, former professional athletes who were enlisted as face cards in the scheme to entice the victims' participations in the game. So basically, people like Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones were utilized as a carrot, if you will, or a mule, even. Like they muled them out to bring in high rollers, entice high rollers that if want to play in this game, you're going to get to play with Chauncey Billups. Come to our game. Come, be with our game because you're going to get a chance to play with an NBA star, a Hall of Famer. He's a coach. Are you going to play with Damon Jones? Da 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 da. And so it was part of the lure. Now, part of this, you might be saying, well, where's the proof that Chauncey was in on it or that Damon was in on it? Well, the indictment sort of lists sort of the details and all of that, and they talk about the games in which Chauncey and Damon Jones were involved in knowingly. They had culpability and knowing that these games were cheat games. That is the reason why I actually mentioned to you the account that came from this pro poker player, Matt Berkeley, who said that he had been invited to join the game, or he had heard about it, but that he didn't want to be involved in the game because it was widely known that the game was rigged. So if other people knew on the outside that this game was rigged, it's probable that Chauncey and Damon also knew that the game was rigged, right? And that they participated in the game and participated in bringing other people into the game, knowing that the game was rigged and it was bet against these sort of unwitting, high rollers that were coming in, and that the monies that were being made on this defrauded the victims, and that they were being laundered. The money was being laundered to members and associates of the Bonanno, the Gambino, and the Genovese organized crime family, of course, the La Cosa Nostra. So, because the games were backed by them in New York, and then, of course, they took a percentage of the crime proceeds from those games. Now, the La Cosa Nostra members and associates had a foothold in the rigged poker games and the scheme because they had pre-existing control over the straight illegal poker games. Remember, I told you that was going to be important later for you to know what the definition of illegal straight poker games were. Illegal poker games are any poker game where the person that's organizing takes a percentage of winnings. That's an illegal poker game. But a straight illegal poker game is where everybody is playing straight, nobody's cheating, and everybody knows what's going on, right? That we're innocently playing, but we all know that the people who are organizing the game here are going to take a percentage. That's a straight illegal poker game. What the government is saying here is that the La Cosa Nostra members and the associates had a foothold in the rigged poker game, the cheating scheme, because they had already had pre-existing control over the straight game. So that means like the people that were involved in the straight game wouldn't think that this game was they were being cheated because they had already had this pre-existing relationship with these people, and then there was already a trend or a reputation that the La Cosa Nostra families were running this straight illegal game. Everybody knew that. So there would be like no, misnomer that, oh, they're all of a sudden, doing a cheating scheme because they had been doing straight poker games already. Um, so they already had a foothold or pre-existing control over those straight illegal games, and had a foothold in the rigged poker scheme, because of that. Now, the straight illegal poker games were where some of the rigged poker games also occurred, right? So one that was hosted principally at Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. I just mentioned to you one of the games is called the Lexington game. That's the Lexington game that was on the record, or on record rather, with the Bonanno family and the Gambino family, or I'm sorry, with the Bonanno family, the Lexington Avenue game. That's the Bonanno's game. And then uh a second game that was hosted principally at Washington Place in Manhattan, was on record with the Gambino family, and it was called the Washington Place game. And as a part of the scheme, some of the charged defendants and their co-conspirators, which would include the Bananos, the organized crime people, and Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones, and all of them, also committed acts of violence. They say that the co-conspirators, they don't name Chauncey Billups specifically, but Chauncey is considered a co-conspirator. So they say that the charged defendants and other co-conspirators also committed acts of violence, including the robbery and extortions charged in the indictment. They said in a typical legitimate poker game, a dealer uses a shuffling machine to shuffle the cards randomly before dealing them to all the players in a particular order. And as set forth and mentioned in the indictment, the rigged games used altered shuffling machines that contain hidden technology, allowing the machines to read all the cards in the deck. And in the indictment, they actually mentioned the Chauncey's game that he was involved in, which I believe is the Lexington Avenue game, that Chauncey was using this shuffling card machine, and that this shuffling card machine was essentially used to read the cards in the deck, giving the upper hand to those who were part of the scheme. Okay. So, because the cards were always dealt in a particular order, to the players at the table, the machines could determine which player would have the winning hand. And so then this information was then transmitted off-site to an off-site member, right, of the conspiracy. So right now I'm explaining the scheme. I'm explaining how all of this happens. So this is how it happened. I'm going to repeat from the top. The rigged games used altered shuffling machines that contain hidden technology, allowing the machines to read all the cards in the deck. And because the cards were always dealt in a particular order by the schemers, by the cheaters in the game, to all the rest of the players at the table, the machines could then determine which player would have the winning hand. So they would already predict which of them would have the winning hand. They would just make sure one of the cheaters had the winning hand. This information was then transmitted to an off-site member of the conspiracy, of the cheating group, who then transmitted that information via cell phone back to a member of the conspiracy. Okay? The people who were at the table, they would transmit who exactly was going to win that information back to the people at the table. This person was referred to as the quarterback or the driver, according to the indictment. The quarterback then secretly signaled this information, usually by prearranged signals like touching certain chips or other items on the table, to other co conspirators playing at the table who were also participants in the scheme. So they would signal one another with, unsuspecting items on the table. Oh, I got a pen. Oh, my head is hurting. Oh, touching your face, touching something, inconspicuous, right? And then they said that they used this information to win poker games against unwitting victims who sometimes lost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time, and that the defendants used other cheating technology as well, such as a chip tray analyzer, essentially, which what that is basically a poker chip tray that you would see on any dealer's table if you go to Atlantic City or Vegas or whatever. But this particular poker chip tray secretly read all the cards that were using hidden cameras in the tray, right? And then there was an x-ray table as well. Like, this is really high tech. Like, they're going through a lot to cheat people. So then they use an x-ray table that they could read face cards down on the table, and then of course special contact lenses, as I mentioned earlier, and or eyeglasses that could read pre-marked cards. Now, the defendants and their co conspirators bet accordingly to ensure that the unsuspecting victims lost money. And through the rigged poker schemes, the defendants' losses were of at least $7 million over the years spanning from uh, 2019 to present. So then they go through and they name the different defendants in the actual indictment. When they named the different defendants, they actually also named their nicknames. Like, these are very sort of like typical nicknames that you would hear in a mafia movie. I think somebody's name is like Tony South because he lives in Georgia. They've got one person, I think the person's name is Pookie. Like, it's really kind of wild, these people and their nicknames that they have. I thought that was interesting. Then there's someone named what is it? Blackie or something like that. It's really interesting. Very, very interesting. They go on and say in this press release, they say, as alleged in the indictment, the Bonanno, Genovese, and Gambino organized crime families of the La Cosa Nostra backed the Lexington Avenue game and the Washington Place game and received a portion of the criminal proceeds from both the straight illegal poker games and rigged games run by the organizers of those games. In particular, they start to name defendants, Betcher, Zen Q, and Trustman, who were the organizers of the Bonanno family for the games, the rigged or the straight. So basically, they had people in order who actually were organizers of the Lexington game. And then they had defendants and were required to make payments to the defendants, Ernest Aiello, Julius Zelani, and Thomas Gerardo of the Bonanno family for the games that were rigged or straight that they operated. So basically, the Bonannos collected. The organizers were considered co-conspirators and non-members of the organized crime family, but they were people who were basically the organizers of the game. Similarly, two other defendants were organizers of the games, John Gallo and a guy by the name of Awawade. They organized the Washington Place game, but then were required to make payments to the defendants, Lee Fama, Joseph, Lonnie, and Ruggiero of the Gambino crime family, and to the defendant, Matthew Dadino of the Genovese crime family, for the games that were rigged or straight that they operated. For a period in 2023, the two games merged and were jointly operated, meaning the two games at Lexington ran by the Bananos, and the game at Washington Place ran by the Gambinos, and that they joined together to jointly operate that particular game, and that during that period, all three organized crime families, the Bananos, the Gambinos, and the Genoveses, receive proceeds from the rigged and illegal poker games. So they go through the does. They say, as charged in the indictment, members of the conspiracy committed violent acts, including assault, extortions, and robbery in furtherance of the schemes to ensure the repayment of debts and continued success of the operation. Between November 22 and November 23, Gerardo, who's part of the Gambino crime family, both punched the victim. I'm sorry, Gerardo, part of the Gambino crime family, Zen Hugh, and Zelani extorted John Doe number 5 to secure the payment of a gambling debt. Among other things, Zen Hugh and Gerardo both punched the victim to get him to pay back the debt. In September of 2023 and October 2023, Betcher, Zenhue, and Trustman extorted another victim by threatening him to pay back a debt from illegal poker games. And on September 7, 2023, Awawade, Hadi, Mazzola, Manucci, and Shroud arranged and committed a gunpoint robbery of a co-conspirator to steal and rigged shuffler machine that the defendants wanted to use. So essentially, the defendants, they're talking about the crime family from the La Cosa Nostra, they actually committed a robbery at gunpoint of one of the co-conspirators that are listed in the indictment as a defendant, in order to steal back a rigged shuffler machine that they wanted to use for the game. This is the epitome of there is no honor among thieves, is what this is. Bettors who were defrauded in the rigged games may be victims under the Mandatory Restitution Act. And so now the FBI is saying, if anyone thinks that they have been a victim of the scheme, to please contact them. The charges in the indictments, they say, are allegations, and the defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. And so that is really the name of it. I wanted to sort of go through these names because I think they're so interesting. Because this is like really going through, what you hear in these mafia movies. Nelson Olivares, he's known as Spanish G. Louis Apicella, known as Lou App. Amar Awade, known as Flappier Poker or Flappy. So Chauncey doesn't have a nickname because he's one of the face card guys, right? Matthew Didino, he's not a wise guy. So Chauncey's not a wise guy, so he doesn't have a nickname. Matthew Didino is known as Matty and the Wrestler. Eric Ernest is known as Spook, which I thought was interesting. I mean, that's for black folks, that's not good. So I'm hoping that's a little much. Okay. And then we have some other ones. Thomas Gerardo's known as Juice. Tony Goodson, known as Black Tony or Tony South. He's in Georgia. Shane Hennon, known as Sugar. And it just goes on. Like, these names are really interesting. John South. John Mazzola, he's known as John South because he's in Georgia. Curtis Meeks, known as Kurt. Anthony Shatterman, known as Doc. And then Robert Shroud, known as Black Rob. So very interesting. This is amazing to me. Like, this, I just don't understand. Okay, so now we've gone through that. That's essentially, I talked about the indictment, so I'm not going to like actually bring the indictment up so you can see it. I brought up the press release and I sort of sprinkled in some of the things. That's basically what the indictment says, the 22-page indictment. The difference is that the indictment gives you more specificity and you can really see who was part of what game and all of that. But you kind of get what's going on here. And essentially, Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones were used as face cards and to lure unsuspecting people into these games to be set up to lose tens of thousands, millions of dollars. And then when they had to pay back the debt and couldn't pay because it was so much money, then they were threatened. The enforcement had to come in. Enforcement from the crime families came in, to basically, tell them you need to pay. What do I think happened? Well, what I think happened is that, or how they got made, meaning how they got busted in all of this. I think one of the victims squealed, is what I think. There's a very interesting part in the casino movie with Bob De Niro and Nicky Santoro, played by Joe Pesci, where they're the bank manager, was didn't want to give Joe Pesci his money back. Like, he couldn't give him his money because it was in an investment fund, basically. And Bob De Niro had the guy over to the house, and he's Joe Pesci's character Nicky Santoro is like going off. He's like, "You better give me my effing money. If you don't give me my money, blah 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 is gonna happen." Bob De Niro took Joe Pesci to the side. The characters, Sam Rothstein, took Nicky Santoro to the side and said, "You need to cool it. This is a straight up dude. Like, if you keep threatening him, he's going to go to the FBI." And that is exactly what I think happened in this situation. When crime family people and other kinds of, criminals get together and they threaten each other and, try to rob each other or whatever, this rarely gets turned over to the police because these people are all criminals. They're all part of the underworld. Who's telling on them? You know what I mean? If one tells on them, then they're going to tell on them, and yet. So nobody talks. That's just how it is. It's an honor code. But when you get a straight guy, like these victims, these John Does 1 through 7, that they brought in to the game to steal from them, this scheme, when you get those kind of people and then you threaten them, threaten to harm their families, all of that, these are the kind of people that go and squeal to the cops. And this is what I think happened. I think that the John Doe people were scared. Some of them, quite frankly, probably didn't have the money. And so they got scared about it and they needed help to get out of the situation because they were in a sense trapped. Let me kind of talk about why or how someone gets trapped in this illegal gambling thing. Well, it kind of goes like this. I am John or Jane Doe, right? And I go and I get into the game not knowing that it's fixed. And then I lose. And so then I continue to gamble to further try to get myself out of a hole, not knowing I'm never going to get myself out of a hole because I have no chance of winning because the game is rigged from the beginning. So what do? I continue to indebt myself into an even deeper hole, is what happens in that situation. And so there's really no way for me to get out of it except for to pay. But I don't have the money to pay. And that's exactly how this thing goes. That's how it kind of they kind of get, trapped in a situation like this, right? And so the face card members, they are part of the cheating team. The face card members are Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones. And even though they're not part of a allegedly, it's them. And even though they're not part of a crime family, they're part of the cheaters, allegedly. And so then they would have knowledge of all of the scheming that goes on with it, allegedly, because they're part of the x-ray tray table and the x-ray contact lenses and the shuffling board and all of these things. And so the one thing I don't understand, and the FBI doesn't allude to this, is why the face card people would be involved in it. They don't say. What the FBI says is that the winnings are spread around to the crime families, that they're the ones that's collecting the winnings, they're the ones that's receiving the winnings. There's never at any point in the indictment that says a percentage of the winnings are going to Chauncey Billups, for example, or maybe some of these other folks who are organizers of the game, like the Steven Zen guy, or the Trustman guy. So I was a little bit confused on that, because what's in it for the face card people, or the organizers, or are they just not mentioning that they were also getting a cut? So one could guess that Chauncey and Damon Jones, as the face card members or the lure members of the cheating team, were getting a percentage or a cut for their work on it, and that the organizers were also getting a percentage or a cut from it as well. But the bulk of the winnings was going to the organized crime families, and that would be sort of like the, reward for these guys, continuing to participate in all of this, right? That is a whole lot, y'all. I do not understand it. I don't understand anybody who would get themselves involved in anything like this, because this is very dangerous. I mean, the moment that you say La Cosa Nostra, Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, Banano, I am not in this. There's no way that I would want to be involved in anything like that. Now, the one missing family that's not involved in any of this are the Colombos. The Colombos, if you're wondering, well, this is four of the five families. Who's the fifth family? The fifth family are the Colombos. You probably have heard about the Colombos. Joe Colombo. If you watch The Godfather of Harlem with my boy Forrest Whitaker, who is the star of the show, and plays the infamous Frank Lucas, then you know that, or actually, no, he doesn't play Frank Lucas. Oh, I always forget, and this is gonna bug me, so I have to look it up, because I'm like, I can't remember who he plays, but I will in a minute. Oh yes, Bumpy Johnson. That's who he plays. How could I forget that? Frank Lucas is actually that'll be part of this next season. But anyway, I digress. Um, he plays the infamous Bumpy Johnson. The and so anyway, in that particular show, the Columbos are center stage in that particular show, and it sort of gives you a timeline. They have a little bit of fiction going on with that too, because they don't go directly on the Bumpy Johnson, Joe Colombo timeline in which it happened in real life. They kind of go in and out. So don't take it as being like, real reality. Like, do your own, research on the Godfather of Harlem. But it is an excellent show. Excellent. Everybody in that show is excellent. I love that show. But anyway, the Columbos were not part of this. They got other things going on, I'm pretty sure. But in this particular scheme, we're just talking about the in the poker scheme, we're actually just talking about three of the families, because the Lucchese's, excuse me, they're not mentioned in this particular scheme. So we're really just talking about the Bananos, Gambinos, and the Genoveses. I'm assuming that the Lucchese's, because they are in part of the overall indictment, that the Lucchese's are involved in the scheme that had to do with the fixing the NBA games. So that is likely the scheme that they're into. I may go into the NBA game fixing scheme tomorrow, but today I wanted to cover the poker game scheme and sort of get that straight. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on it. I've heard, some of the NBA players really getting quite upset that this is sort of the tone of it all. Obviously, like I said at the top of this episode, this is very disconcerting, because this really sort of challenges the very integral integrity of the game of the National Basketball Association, even though this particular indictment that I'm talking about in this show is not about fixing games. You have an NBA coach that was referenced in the game fixing indictment, but charged in a poker and a poker scheme, as well as an ex NBA player. And the reason why that is so paramount is because, like, that shows the lack of integrity, allegedly, that Chauncey Billups would have to be involved in something like this. Hey, here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that Chauncey had no idea this was going on. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that he had no idea this was going on. It's very possible. It's very possible that Chauncey had no idea that this was happening. It's very possible that he thought this was a straight illegal poker game. Guys play these games all the time, straight illegal poker games, right? This is not like anything new. So, and because they mixed the straight illegal poker games with the rigged illegal poker games, it's possible that both Damon Jones and Chauncey Billups didn't know anything was going on, and that they thought they were actually getting high rollers for the straight games and not the rigged games, since they were interwoven. Maybe they didn't know. I have to give benefit of the doubt where benefit of the doubt is due. We don't have any video. We don't have any photos right now. All we have is the U.S. Attorney's Office saying this is the indictment and this is what they're, being charged with. So there's no one yet to say that there's concrete information. Also, another thing I want to mention, guys, listen, I am not here to judge anybody, but if you are a high roller and you get an NBA player that's coming to you and being like, oh, join the game because it's this, that, and the third, some people, I'm not saying they deserve that, because no one deserves to be scammed on, but some people are really sort of, have the propensity to get kind of screwed, if you will, in these sorts of situations, because they're out looking to be in these important games. Oh, I want to be next to so and so. I want to be in the room. I want to be. And see, this is what I'm saying. I always say to people, keep humility should be your number one goal in life, because humility will keep you out of some very scary situations, and this is one of them. I've been around people like this, who are these sorts of people who want to be in the know. They want to be able to brag to their friends, at their high, falutin jobs, that they play poker with, Chauncey Billups or whoever. I actually ran into someone, it's during my time in entertainment, who did brag that they play poker with Shaquille O'Neal, for example. Like having people go and try, like players, ball players, having them entice other people to join these like exclusive games is not exactly uncommon. Like, this thing does happen. You know what I'm saying? So the thing here that the government is going to have to prove when it comes to Chauncey Billups specifically and Damon Jones, but we'll just cap it at Chauncey, is they're going to have to prove culpability. All that they have said in all of this has not spelled out culpability. What they basically said is this was the scheme. These people, Chauncey was considered a cheater, but he was also only considered a cheater because he was brought in to be the face card to lure these guys into the game. The government also said that there was a mix of rigged and straight games. Chauncey could have been recruiting people to come and join the straight game, not knowing that these guys were actually going to rig the game that he had brought the people in for. So I'm saying the government has a good deal of reasonable doubt to combat, because they have to prove that there's culpability on the sides of all of the defendants, but especially the non-crime family defendants. They have to prove that these people knew full well that was going on. Now, these guys, these co-conspirators who were not part of the crime family, who were beating people up or helping the crime members beat people up, they probably knew what was happening. But you're talking about Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones, who are just being used to mule in people that were high rollers. There's very, very good chance they had no idea what was happening. There's also a good chance they did. So we're all going to have to see together. The other part of this is the fact that, listen, guys, like, we need to really, see some concrete evidence here that Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones actually utilized these glasses. You know what I'm saying? That they utilized the contact lenses, that they knew that the table was x-ray tables and all of that. You heard from Matt Berkey, who's the pro poker player, who said that he knew that the games were fixed. He knew that they were rigged. He had heard about it back in 2019. He had this interview, did this interview in 2023. He knew that Chauncey was a part of it. So this is kind of lending to the side that Chauncey knew about it. But again, you're going to have to come stronger than somebody said this and that and the third. Now, it's very possible that, you know, Chauncey was part of the straight game. Damon Jones were part of the straight game, and that maybe they got in debt to the crime family. They got in debt to the organizers who maybe they didn't know was the crime family, because if you recall in the indictment that I read, that there were non-crime family members who were organizers of the game. So it's possible that Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones did not know that the game was backed by the Bananos, the Genoveses, the Gambinos. That it's very possible that they didn't know, and that maybe they actually got indebted themselves, that they lost some hands in this, whether it was rigged or not. Maybe they were being scammed on in order to be in debt. How do you get yourself out of debt? You need to be our face card guy. You need to be our guy that helps us do X, Y, and Z. And then by then it was too late for them to get out because they felt trapped. They felt trapped. It's quite possible that Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones are also victims in the scheme. Okay, guys, that's going to be it for CasNCourt TV for today. I will be back later on tomorrow with more. Thank you so much for joining me today. Of course, all of this is alleged, and any of the commentary that I gave is just my opinion. Please leave your opinion and commentary down below if you want to yap off about you think I'm wrong, or you think I'm right, or you think it's stupid, or you think whatever you think about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Appreciate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back with more. Thanks so much, guys. Peace. Take it easy.